on our broadcast this Thursday night. Korea's low birth rate has become a critical problem, and that's to blame on late marriages, and that's to blame on lack of decent jobs for the nation's working age group, according to President Park Geun-hye. North Korea's leader claims the reclusive state has developed a hydrogen bomb, saying North Korea is now a powerful nuclear weapon state. The rest of the world isn't convinced. And the world marks Human Rights Day today. 67 years ago on December 10th, the UN adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We shed light on the atrocious situation just north of the Korean border. News Center begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those around the world. Welcome to News Center. We need more jobs for job seekers in this nation. President Park Geun-hye is calling for efforts to boost efforts in job creation, as lack of decent jobs is one reason behind the nation's super low birth rate. Arirang News Presidential Office correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has more on what the Korean leader said at a meeting focused on tackling the nation's low birth rate and aging population.
President Park has called for stronger effort to tackle Korea's low birth rate, blaming the situation on late marriages and a job shortage.
지난 10년간 출산율 감소의 가장 큰 원인은 초혼 연령의 상승에 따른 만혼화 현상입니다.
Korea's fertility rate stood at 1.2 in 2014, one of the lowest in the OECD. The country has spent some $68 billion in the last decade to raise the figure to 2.1, a rate that would keep the population stable. At a meeting on Thursday, President Park also called for greater job creation efforts, making a note of the government's push for labor reform.
노동시장의 이중 구조를 개선하며 근로시간 단축을 통해서 정규직 일자리를 늘리는데 기성세대와 모든 경제 주체들이 함께 노력해야 합니다.
President Park said many young people are hesitant to get married due to the high cost of living and called for measures to address this issue. But, she said, government efforts alone will not be enough to resolve the problems associated with the low birth rate and aging population.
모든 사회 구성원들의 인식과 관행, 문화가 바뀔 때 제도가 효과를 발휘하고 정착될 수 있을 것입니다.
Wrapping up the meeting, President Park said the most important thing is putting the plans into action, and she called on officials to continue listening to the voices of the people. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
It was the first day of the Parliament's extraordinary session, today after the close of a 100-day-long regular session yesterday. Lawmakers have plenty in their hands, ranging from redrawing the country's electoral map to approving several bills that have been awaiting passage for a while now. Our senior parliamentary correspondent Park Ji-won joins me from the National Assembly. Ji-won, Speaker Chung Ui-hwa had some strong words for the legislators. What was his message?
Yes, Geun-young, the Assembly Speaker called for a real change on the part of lawmakers from both rebel parties to bring parliamentary operations back to normal.
This is an abnormal situation, and it's being repeated. Instead of efforts towards communication, accusations are the only things in abundance.
Speaking in Parliament on Thursday afternoon, the Speaker also said party members need to take off their tinted lenses when evaluating the bills pushed by the other side.
The rival parties need to drop their obsolete ideological prejudices against the bills being pushed by the other party. They're seeing each other's bills as something that will either help conglomerates and the privileged, or something that goes against the market.
The list of pending bills that's considered urgent by the government and the ruling party includes a series of labor reform bills, the Service Industry Promotion Act, and the Counterterrorism Act. The main opposition party is in favor of a bill that aims to foster cooperative associations and another that would facilitate cooperation between conglomerates and small and medium-sized companies. However, due to the standoff between the rival parties, none of the bills have been fully reviewed in committee. Speaker Chung said the assembly is at risk of being rated the worst ever and again urged lawmakers to move the bills forward. Chung also said the assembly should finish the task of redrawing Korea's electoral map once and for all by next Tuesday, when registration for candidates hoping to run in the upcoming April general elections begins. Kan-young?
Well, the Speaker's plea to the lawmakers to put aside their differences and approve some critical bills that need passage. Thank you, Ji-won. That was our Park Ji-won from the National Assembly. Now, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un claims the reclusive state has developed a hydrogen bomb, a step up from the less powerful atomic bomb. He's also declared that North Korea has become a nuclear weapon state. Outside experts, however, are not convinced. Why such dramatic statement by the North Korean leader? Why now? Our Kwon So-ah takes a shot at answering this question.
North Korea is in possession of a hydrogen bomb. That's what North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said, according to Pyongyang state media Thursday. The Korean Central News Agency said he made the remark during an inspection of an arms plant in Pyongyang. He was quoted as saying North Korea has managed to become a great nuclear power capable of defending the independence and dignity of the state. Experts say this is the first time Kim has ever mentioned a hydrogen bomb, as opposed to his more frequent statements on the regime's nuclear weapons capabilities. With the H-bomb, they believe the North is merely in the early stages of development.
The power of a hydrogen bomb is measured in megatons. Even advanced countries do not possess them. It would also be difficult to test them so close to China, as they will have to do it underground, but extremely deep, so that's also regarded as impossible.
A government official said there is no evidence on Pyongyang having developed nor having the technology to build an H-bomb, adding Kim's remarks seem to be words of rhetoric. Some say it could be the opening gambit ahead of a round of high-level inter-Korean talks on Friday.
The show of its military capabilities could be an indirect way of pressuring South Korea and a move to lead the talks.
Professor Kim also said the move could be seen as a way to manipulate the media or a gesture to start talks with the U.S. and the international community. Although the existence of an H-bomb in North Korea leaves room for doubt, the regime does appear to have made progress on its main missile launch site. According to the U.S. website 38 North, satellite imagery suggests construction of new propellant bunkers at a launch pad in the northwest of North Korea are close to completion. 38 North said this may indicate the end of a 3-year program to upgrade the site, which could mean Pyongyang could be ready to launch larger rockets by early next year. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The two Koreas are putting the final touches to tomorrow's vice ministerial talks set to take place at a jointly run industrial complex in Kaesong on the northern side of the border. It'll mark the first high-level meeting between Seoul and Pyongyang since 2007. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Sung Ji-sun has a preview of what may top the negotiations table Friday morning, Korea time.
Everything is ready for the first high-level talks between the two Koreas in 8 years. South Korea will be represented by Unification Vice Minister Hwang Buk-i and 2 other officials. His counterpart from the north is Chun Jong-soo, who, like Hwang, has a great deal of experience with inter-Korean exchanges. The delegation from Seoul will depart for Kaesong Industrial Complex at 8 a.m. on Friday, and the two sides will sit down at 10:30 Seoul time, when each side will outline their priorities. Seoul's focus will be on arranging for regular reunions for war-separated families, while Pyongyang will likely demand resumption of a tour program to Mount Kumgang Resort as a prerequisite.
Seoul's stance on resuming the Mount Kumgang tour program will be key, but it will be difficult for the two sides to narrow their differences during this initial round. The talks can be considered a success if the two sides set a date for the next talks to keep the momentum going.
The two sides have decided not to put limits on the topics up for discussion after Seoul proposed last month that all outstanding issues should be covered. Given that, the first round of talks is likely to continue on tonight, if not for another day or two. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Today, December 10th, is Human Rights Day. On this day in 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Human Rights Watch, which is an international non-governmental organization that conducts research and advocacy on human rights, released a statement today calling on the UNSC to act on North Korea's human rights abuse. How serious is the human rights abuse in that reclusive state, and how can the international community put a stop to the violations? Well, joining me on the phone is Phil Robertson of Human Rights Watch, based in Bangkok. Phil, thanks so much for connecting with us.
Sure, glad to be on the show.
Now, the UN Security Council is taking up the North Korean regime's atrocious human rights record as a formal agenda item today. Now, your organization is calling on the UNSC to once and for all act on North Korea's human rights abuse. What is HRW calling for?
Well, specifically, we would like to have the UN Security Council refer the North Korean government to the International Criminal Court so that there could be accountability for the crimes against humanity that the UN Commission of Inquiry found during their investigation in 2013 and 2014. This is the UN Commission of Inquiry that was chaired by former Justice Michael Kirby from Australia, which found, among other things, that crimes against humanity had been committed by the North Korean government. And some of those crimes documented in the report included extermination, murder, enslavement, torture, imprisonment, rape, forced abortions, other sexual violence, persecution on political, religious, and racial and gender grounds, and forcible transfer of populations. It really doesn't get any worse than that. North Korea is an international human rights pariah, and ideally we would like to have the UN Security Council act on that and demand accountability through that kind of referral to an international legal body that could then take action.
Phil, what you just described, those seem to me as crimes against humanity. Now, do we have proof that North Korea is committing these crimes?
Well, the Commission of Inquiry documented these crimes through interviews with persons who had fled North Korea. It was a very comprehensive examination of the entire record, and that produced a large report which now is must-reading for people interested in human rights in North Korea. It's a documentation exercise now that is continuing with the UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights Office in Seoul. So the UN believes that these crimes have taken place, and it is taking action based on that belief.
So what can the UNSC do to stop the North Korean regime from committing such crimes? I mean, can the international community, number one, hold the Kim Jong-un regime accountable for these?
Well, it's going to be very hard. And part of the reason is while the UN Security Council is debating human rights in North Korea for the second time in 2 years, which is unprecedented, such a referral to the International Criminal Court, which was what we're ultimately pushing for, would require a vote of the entire Security Council. And the Security Council has 5 permanent members, of which Russia and China are there, and they could exercise their veto to prevent that vote from going forward. So at this point, we are just trying to build more international pressure on North Korea, documenting further the abuses that have taken place, demanding action, and recognizing that maybe this year or the next year may not be the time that we can actually get to the point where we can see Kim Jong-un and other senior officials in an international criminal court, but that ultimately, over the long term, we will see them held accountable.
Now, let's talk about those refugees or those North Koreans who cross the border out of North Korea because they want to leave that state. And they face getting deported from a third country. What about their human rights?
Well, people have the right, according to international human rights standards, to leave a country and to return to it, including the country from which they originate. And that right has been effectively denied by Kim Jong-un and the North Korean government. They have been trying to prevent North Koreans from leaving the country. They have fortified that border They have shot at people trying to cross the border. They have pursued North Korean refugees in China who are trying to make their way across China and to get to another country where they can go to a third country, mostly South Korea, and safety. So there's an active effort by the North Korean government to try to prevent any of their people from leaving the country, and also to prevent any sort of information like news, movies, all these other sort of things that were coming in through USB drives coming into North Korea. So the government is being very, very aggressive in trying to shut down the avenues of access to information and knowledge that the North Koreans have taken up increasingly over the past 5 to 10 years.
All right, Phil Robertson, Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch Asia, thank you indeed for speaking with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, concerted efforts by the international community is a must to put an end to North Korea's extreme human rights violations, but individuals and rights groups can make a great difference as well. How are those in South Korea doing their part in addressing the brutalities happening just north of the border? Our news feature tonight with Lee Ji-won.
In June of this year, the United Nations opened a new human rights office in Seoul to monitor the human rights situation in North Korea. Furthermore, the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly passed last month a resolution on such issue in an overwhelming vote of 112 to 19. These two landmark events this year alone have further underlined an undeniable truth. The human rights situation in North Korea is not only in the world's radar, but also a pressing global agenda.
Last year in February, the UN Commission of Inquiry published a report on North Korea's human rights violations. These violations were systematic, extensive, and serious, and they have been ongoing for decades. The situation in the North is no different than the Nazis' brutality, which claimed the lives of 6 million Jews, or that of Cambodia's Pol Pot of Khmer Rouge, which killed 2 million.
Efforts in South Korea are also seen in both governmental and civilian levels. According to Seoul's Ministry of Unification, there are currently 60 non-governmental organizations registered with the government working on improving North Korea's human rights situation. Such NGO is the Citizens Alliance for North Korean Human Rights, a group credited of introducing the human rights issue for the first time to the world in the 1990s.
We
first started campaigning on the issue in South Korea, but people were very reluctant to talk about North Korean issues, as many considered them to be very political. So we thought maybe if the international society underlines the situation first, then South Koreans could also see the problem as it is, a human rights issue. So we held global campaign activities which raised awareness both internationally and domestically. NKHR seeks other international NGOs and governments to support this cause, and it tries to further make the issue known to the world by means of exhibitions and cultural events. But how serious is the issue? We met a North Korean defector who now works as a painter, conveying his message through his works. Just 10 years ago, Song-byuk used to draw propaganda posters in North Korea.
The most basic and important need of a human being is food, but North Korea does not allow that. To feed our family, my father and I tried to get it from China. But while crossing the Duman River, my father drifted away and died, and I was caught and taken to a prison camp. It was there that I saw the reality of North Korea. North Korea has no such thing as individual's dignity. Many people died in the camp, and I really envied them. I wish I could die fast and live another life. This is the reality of North Korea.
Most North Koreans defect not for freedom, but for survival.
There is no freedom of press, expression or movement in North Korea. There isn't and shouldn't be another place like North Korea.
This group prepares for the process of transitional justice, which will likely occur after reunification or when North Korea agrees on inspections over its human rights situation. Through testimonies of North Korean defectors, the organization collects evidence on the regime's public executions and pinpoints the locations where those took place in a map.
there's a lot of pressure that can be put on those leaders for their behavior to change. One way that people put it is they call it accountability anxiety. If you know that somebody's watching you and you know that what you're doing is a crime against humanity, you're going to start get a little bit nervous, and that might change the way they behave and change the way they approach these sorts of issues within North Korea.
As the world is working on to improve the human rights of the North Korean people, South Korea should go beyond activities held by organizations and engage society altogether.
To improve the North Korean human rights issue, organizations need support. And by support, it doesn't simply mean food aid or pressure North Korea to hold talks. An actual way to solve the issue is to let North Koreans know what the outside world really looks like and help them escape Kim's abusive rule.
North Korean human rights issue is in the global spotlight, and individuals and organizations are working to improve the situation, hoping that the North Korean people can soon gain their freedom and rights. 이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
Korea's central bank has left its key rate unchanged at 1.5%, a move largely seen as a continuation of its wait-and-see approach. Now, this is in line with market expectations as the Korean economy faces a number of obstacles from within and outside of the country. Our Hwang Ji-hye joins us from the nation's central bank. Ji-hye, how did the monetary policy meeting unfold today?
In its monthly monetary policy meeting on Thursday, the Bank of Korea, as you said, decided to stand pat on its record low key interest rate of 1.5% for a sixth straight month. The top central banker said that it's keeping a close eye on the U.S. Federal Reserve's meeting next week, where policymakers are widely expected to raise the interest rate for the first time in almost a decade.
A rate rise in the U.S. does not necessarily mean the BOK will directly follow the suit. We will be monitoring capital movements in emerging economies after the liftoff and how the domestic economy reacts to these changes.
The governor also differentiated Korea from other emerging markets, saying a massive capital outflow following a rate hike in the U.S. is unlikely due to the country's strong fundamentals like its bountiful current account surplus and foreign reserves. Still, the economy faces uncertainties from feeble global demand, especially from China, that played a big part in negative growth every month this year in Korea's outbound shipments. Conditions at home do not look so bright either. The country's household debt is rising fast, already exceeding $1 trillion, and many point to government spending as being the main driver behind better than expected performance in the third quarter. Given that, a lot of analysts are expecting no change in the key rate for quite some time.
But I think next year is going to be same kind of growth path as this year. So if it's so, I think BOK will hold this throughout the next year.
Now, much focus is on the BOK's new growth outlook for 2016 that will be released next month. The BOK currently expects the Korean economy to grow 3.2% next year, but some say low global oil prices could lead to a downgrade of that forecast and that this could signal further rate cuts down the road. Kon-young?
And we'll also wait and see what the impact is like from the Fed's rate decision later this month. Thank you, Ji-hye. That was our Hwang Ji-hye from the nation's central bank. Now, fall in foreign direct investment in Korea is leading to the loss of hundreds of thousands of jobs every year. Why the drop in investment and what cost does it come at? Our Shin Se-min explains.
Korea is losing 130,000 jobs every year as the result of falling foreign direct investment in the country. In its latest report, the Korea Economic Research Institute says the cumulative number of jobs lost from dwindling foreign investment stood at 927,000 since 2001. Leading up to 2013, that would be an annual average of 71,000 jobs Korea could have had, but didn't manage to secure. Fewer jobs mean lower production, with figures showing that tumbling FDI has cost Korea over $122 billion since 2001. Simply put, the average loss in production per year between 2001 and 2013 neared $10 billion. Inbound foreign capital has been contracting since the early 2000s on the back of a strict labor market that offers less flexibility for companies. The net loss for direct investment also signals that more Korean firms are now doing business outside of the country in search of more lucrative markets for operation.
For local firms that are looking to get a better deal in price competitiveness by setting up production lines overseas, the government should come up with more measures to keep them home.
Complicated business regulations are another factor that experts say hinder many foreign investors from putting their money in Korea, adding that the government's reform drive should be able to ensure there is a better balance between foreign investment flowing into Korea and the amount heading out. 신세민, Arirang News.
74 years ago today, Korea declared war on Japan. Not a real war, but it was an expression of determination and a diplomatic approach to gaining recognition from the international community for itself as a legitimate state. Our Lee Soo-eun tells us more.
On December 7, 1941, Japan launched an air raid on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. That sparked a Pacific War with the United States, expanding World War II beyond Europe. The world remembers that history. But many don't know that 3 days after the Pearl Harbor attack, the Provisional Government of Korea in Shanghai, led by independence fighter Kim Il-sung, declared war on Japan, which had colonized Korea in 1910. And on Thursday, surviving independence fighters gathered in Seoul at the Kim Il-sung Museum and Library to commemorate the 74th anniversary of the war declaration.
This event today commemorates the Korean Independence Army's entry into World War II as a part of the Allied forces. The declaration of war on Japan was sent to embassies in China, so it had great diplomatic significance.
A student representative gave a reading of the war declaration, which renders invalid the treaties Japan made with Korea to annex it, and outlines the provisional government's commitment to protecting Korea's interests and rights as a nation.
The independence fighters are people I've only read about in history books. I'm honored and grateful to have had the chance to meet them in person.
There are 83 independence fighters who sought Korea's liberation from Japan still alive today. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Argentines bid farewell to President Cristina Fernandez after 8 years in power. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Now, Bruce, what kind of a legacy does President Fernandez leave behind in Argentina?
Look, Kanyang, Fernandez is loved by so many in her country, and that was apparent by the thousands that flooded into the streets of Buenos Aires to celebrate her 2 terms. Some of her biggest victories were expanding welfare benefits and introducing same-sex marriage and other civil rights.
Well, the incoming president, President Mauricio Marci, stands far right of Fernandez. What kind of shifts can be expected in Argentina under the conservative new leader?
Marci and other critics of Fernandez say she created a handout culture with her policies and damaged Argentina's economy. Which is the 3rd largest in Latin America, to note. For a start, Marci's promised to pull back state controls on the economy, but he's going up against 12 straight years of leftist rule and filling the shoes of an extremely popular leader. The support Fernandez has seen as she prepares to leave office emphasizes how big a challenge Marci faces to implement his policies. Many supporters said the fight's not even over, though Fernandez is leaving office.
We are all staying in to defend what has been accomplished and to try and secure more benefits for everyone.
On top of her populist support, Fernandez's party holds the most seats in parliament. Under Argentine law, she's eligible to run for president again in 2019, despite already having served 2 terms. Time magazine has named German Chancellor Angela Merkel as its Person of the Year. Time cited Merkel's resilience and leadership in the face of the Syrian refugee crisis as a factor in the decision. Merkel also had to tackle the turmoil over the European Union currency in 2015. Time called her an indispensable player in both issues.
Her to-do list outstripped probably anyone else on the planet, from steering Europe through serial debt crises to welcoming literally 1 million migrants from Syria and other tumultuous places into Europe. And
Merkel was elected in 2005 and is the first woman to lead Germany. She's been called the most powerful politician on the planet.
Well, some people disagree with Merkel's open arms policy concerning refugees, but Time magazine has considered many polarizing figures, I see.
Sure, Kanyang. The shortlist contained Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump as well. So many divisive figures on the list. Why? It's not just about being popular. It's about being newsworthy. So these names appeared in the news a lot. They drew a lot of attention. They did a lot of things, whether for the good or bad, and that's perspective.
Well, Donald Trump, newsworthy, yes. Inflammatory remarks, yes. But as for Merkel, the quote that sums up why Merkel was selected as the Person of the Year for Time magazine was that was for her moral leadership, I suppose, in a world that largely lacks it, it said. So we'll have to, I guess it is a good reason, right?
You know, the door's still open, and the crisis regarding refugees is far from ending. So we'll see how our decision ultimately affects Germany, and then maybe we can make a more, a confirmed decision about that policy.
Let's do that. All right, Bruce, thank you so much for today. It was one gloomy and rainy day here in Seoul today, but considering that we're in the second week of December, I really can't complain about the temperatures, which was very not winter-like, I dare say. For more on the weather update, let's go over to our Jihan. Jihan.
Hello, Ganyang. Yes, you're right. It was murky and drizzling, but the temperature hike surely didn't cause many people to bundle up today. While most of the rain clouds are gone from the capital area, but the southern regions of the country will see lingering rain up to 20 millimeters tomorrow. And mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province will see snow till tomorrow morning. And once the rain lets up, skies will gradually get sunnier, but high humidity of the air will lead to morning fog in the inland regions, so drivers will need to drive with extra caution. Besides, the roads are going to be wet anyway, so again, be sure to drive with caution. Now, temperature-wise, it's going to be similar to today, meaning pretty mild, so let's check on the lows first. Here in the capital, we'll kick off at 5, and that's about 6 degrees higher than the seasonal average. Daegu will start out the day at 9, and Busan and Jeju will kick off at 11 and 12 respectively. And afternoon highs, it's going to be pretty mild. It will almost feel like late autumn. Seoul, Daejeon, and Daegu will all peak at 11, and Busan and Jeju will see a high of 13 tomorrow afternoon. Now, relatively mild temperatures will persist through the weekend, so the weather should not be a concern for any outdoor activities. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
어려운 뉴스를 도웁시다. 스웨덴 뉴스를 도웁시다. 스웨덴 뉴스를 도웁시다.
안녕하세요.
어려운 이웃을 돕시다. 스웨덴 이웃을 돕시다.
Well, it's that time of the year again where it's a time to give. Giving is a privilege, like some say. That is our broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Moon Ga-young. Thanks everyone for watching. We hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.